Sweet. Right, team. Next talk we've got, we're talking about braids, and no, that's not the ones in your hair. We're talking about braided rivers here. So I've got Marcus Girvan here. He's from Boffa Miskell, and he is here to talk about effective landscape scale weed management and braided rivers. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon. Great to be here in Palmy. I'm very excited today to be sharing some of our insights about landscape scale weed management in New Zealand's braided rivers. I must firstly acknowledge Pete Caldwell, my colleague back in Christchurch, on whose behalf I am delivering this today. So what have we got in store? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of landscape scale management, why at the landscape scale, and how valuable that is. I'll speak about the Rakitata River partnership-based program, which really is an exemplar, in my view, of a really highly functional landscape scale weed management program. The three keys to effective management, in our view, and we end on a few challenges and successes. So if we really were to boil it all down, what are the keys to effective weed management at the landscape scale? And putting to one side funding and long-term sustainable consistent funding, which we'd all probably agree is pretty necessary to be successful, there's three things that stand out. The first is working to a strategy, making sure we're very much aligned in the strategic objectives. Using quality data for planning and reporting, it really is the foundation to great and effective management. And collaborating and communicating frequently with your funding partners and stakeholders. So if you've not ever been backcountry enough to be amongst some of these beautiful braided river systems, this is what it looks like. This is the upper Rakitata River. They are huge. They're really vast landscapes when you're in amongst it. They're kilometres wide. Huge mountains and absolutely beautiful. These landscapes, they have multiple landowners often, and that adds complexity obviously, as well as numerous weed species. We're talking about gorse and broom being some of the fundamental species up here, but Russell lupin, there's alder, there's cotoneaster, there's all sorts. There's a huge array of species which adds complexity. And of course there's the vulnerable native species that we're looking to protect, both flora and fauna in these landscapes. This is a sister catchment, the Wilberforce River, if you know it. And you can see down on the bottom here, it's not under active management, and you can see the gorse has really taken over in some of these braids, which is not what we're trying to achieve. Upstream of that yellow line, though, is under active management. It's looking in great shape. And so while we're doing all of this work, well, it's largely because of these guys. Anyone know what this bird is? Anyone seen one before? Yep. It looks a lot like a banded dotterel. It's a ribal, yeah. So it's an impressive bird. It's got a horizontally asymmetric beak. So it's designed to hook rocks out of the way so it can feed. And I've been told they've got necks like Formula 1 drivers. Very strong. And they love to breed in these braided open cobbles. And obviously if it's vegetated, you lose habitat, and close vegetation provides cover for predators. But in that photo on the right there is a nest. Can anyone see the eggs? Give me a thumbs up if you can see the eggs. Few of you have. Yes? There they go, just there. So really well camoed. You could easily stand on them if you weren't careful in breeding season. So the Rakitata River really is an exemplar, like I say, of an effective landscape scale program. It's there directly west of Christchurch. And a land care group was kicked off back in '92 by some wonderful leaders and landowners in the region, Roe Ackland, the late Roe Ackland on the left, and Laurie Prouting on the right. Great leaders, like I say, they galvanised the community in the upper catchment and really brought the landowners together around a common vision for the braided riverbed. And that was to protect the indigenous flora and fauna and enhance the natural environment of the upper Rangitata River in a societal, environmental and economically sustainable way. And they really, back in '92, they formed an agreement with the key agencies, Land Information New Zealand, Department of Conservation, ECAN, the district councils being Timaru and Ashburton, got Fish and Game involved and really got this great committee and group together to back their vision for what they wanted, which is really to enhance the biodiversity. So she's a big place up there, 150,000 hectares. It's just a little bit smaller than Stewart Island, And this is broken into land ownership, this project area, DOC being the largest, which is in the green. You've got the blue being the braid plain essentially throughout this catchment. It's about 11,000 hectares of braided river. So it's a decent amount of land that's under active management. And the structure of the way it works from a funding point of view is that Toitū Whenua Land Information New Zealand is a lead agency on this program. They pool their funding with ECAN and DOC, and they engage Boffa Miskell to project manage this, but the funding comes together and it's spent where it's best prioritised within the whole catchment, putting tenure to one side. So it moves away from that siloed approach that we traditionally see, where each agency spends their money on their priorities, all in agreement about what the priorities are. And it builds in some real resilience into the program by operating in this way. Just a couple of images, big landscape, very inaccessible and remote. But boy, is it beautiful in some of these areas too, and some amazing biodiversity values and wetlands, as you can see. So why landscape scale management? Well, it allows us to focus on the highest priorities first. So like I say, when the money's been pulled together and you know what your priorities are, you can target them first. Like I say, it builds that financial resilience. So if, say, just picking an agency, say DOC has a bit of a budget cut, it doesn't mean the program falls over. It doesn't mean there's big gaps in the program. It still means those priorities are targeted. And when you have one group or person that's responsible for delivering the management, it means they're the single point of contact. They can see exactly what's happening. They have all the data at their fingertips, and there's clearly some efficiencies that are built into that when you're managing contractors to deliver the work over across these tenures. Bless you. So, what we think of the three keys, one of the keys to effective landscape scale management in these large braided river systems is to work to a strategy. When you've got a really complex problem to solve, when you've got multiple species, large areas, multi-tenure, you really need to have a good strategy in place so you know what you're looking to achieve. And one of the big benefits is that if you've written a strategy, you've done a weed stock take. So we've had boots on the ground, walked some of these upper catchments, flown the bits that you need to because they're too remote. You might have been out in four-wheel drive or even jet boat to get the data that you need, but you've got a great base set of data, which you can then put in front of those stakeholders and then talk through what the priorities are and have an agreement around that. It also means that you can go back and you can see how you've progressed over time as well, because you've got that stock take. And one of the other benefits we found is that when you're on the ground and you come across a remote isolated weed of some sort, then why don't you just control it while you're there? You cut it and paste it as you go. It just it takes some of the risk away. You obviously can't do too much at one time, but it means you can get ahead of the game a bit. And this is what some of the data looks like that's been collected. And talking to Pete about this, he says he relies on this all the time. He goes back to that data set that was collected during the strategy review and ensures that those priorities are being focused on. So it leads nicely onto what we also believe is highly valuable for these types of programs, is having a great quality data to work with. And we have some very prescriptive data standards for our contractors. We set it out that in black and white in their contracts, and they must adhere to it. The ground contractors must have GPSs running at all times when they're on site, so we can see exactly where they've been and where they haven't. Aerial contractors, they have their secondary tracking on, primary tracking, they're collecting species data at the same time, and that means that you've got this consistent and repeatable data set, and you can start to draw out these trends, and that's super valuable for when you're planning the future program for the following year. And certainly the apps that we have available these days are really the future. You've got the ArcGeos Online suite, the field maps. It really is expediting the results that we're seeing. So this is one of the sub-catchments. We've got the grey track logs there of the helicopters, and what you may not see so well are these yellow dots. So that's some broom that's been found on the berms. That data's gold. We'll be sending contractors back to those spots first next year to make sure they follow up any seedlings. And the third key is around collaborating and communicating frequently with your funding partners and your key stakeholders. And so get I think get people out on the ground and look at these sites. The people that are involved in these programs are in those roles for a reason. They're passionate about this work as well. They have different views and insights that they can share. So get them out on site, looking at the problem, and tap into their knowledge. There's stacks of knowledge amongst the stakeholders that you can really lean on, and it can really add value to these programs. The land managers, including the landowners in these catchments, they're super interested in knowing what's going on. So communicating with them frequently, updating them on when contractors are going through, they see things, and often those farmers are super intuitive when it comes to weed management. So there's lots of great insights you can glean from them. So challenges, I said I wasn't going to talk about funding, but we all know it's difficult out there at the moment from a economic point of view. And look, if funding isn't going up, then you're going backwards. Costs are escalating, contractor costs are going up. So that continues to be a challenge for these large programs. We have new and problematic species coming into these catchments too. Does anyone know what weed species that is? Have you seen it before? It's a false tamarisk. Very well done. So it's a wind-dispersed species, which adds extra complication to these programs, where the majority of the species up here are moved downstream by water largely, and a bit more predictable. But with false tamarisk and grey willow, they're turning up anywhere, so it definitely adds extra challenge. And of course, climate change, that's a happening thing. We're getting more extreme weather events. Operational windows are tighter than they used to be. It's harder to get contractors on the ground during these flood flow events, and obviously some of these species are going to thrive more in these warming climates. A few successes though. Well, that picture speaks for itself really. Getting really on top of some of these broom infestations, which is awesome to see. The kaki never used to be in the Rakitata River. Around 3 or so years ago, I'm told that a breeding population has turned up in this catchment, which is pretty exciting. And talking with Pete about this, something that's stuck with me, he said that, Marcus, we're not just managing these programs for the species that are currently there, these indigenous species that are already breeding. It's for those species that are still to come. And so when you've got kaki flying in from the Mackenzie and setting up shop there, it's pretty exciting. And also the upper Rangitata Land Care Group, they're still out there doing the spraying themselves. They get the landowners together a couple of times a year and do a spray day. And right from the word go, they've been doing that every year. So very passionate group, and exhibited some amazing leadership. So just to recap on those key takeaways, certainly for these large complex programs, we really encourage you to work to a strategy and get a weed stock take put in place. To use quality data really is the bedrock to great operational planning, and to keep up those comms and collaborate with your key stakeholders and funding partners. Just some acknowledgements here of a few parties, but most of all, Toitū Whenua, Land Information New Zealand, Tracy, Jordan, Sean and Lauren for the great work they're doing, for engaging us and trusting us to deliver these programs on their behalf, and obviously Pete Caldwell for allowing me to present on his behalf. Ka mihi nui. Thank you.
Any questions for Marcus? Yep, Taylor?
How do you manage the different expectations and values of the different stakeholders?
Yeah, great question. That all gets fleshed out during that strategy development phase. So there's obviously all the data's put in front of the stakeholders, there's recommendations made on approach, and so getting everyone around the table and talking that through and agreeing strategic directives and priorities, it all gets done up front, so it allows the program to work quite smoothly thereafter. Good question.
Those before and after images are very, very powerful. Have you got sort of final resolution around that in terms of longitudinal studies?
Yeah, I agree. Very powerful stuff, isn't it, those visuals? As far as further in-depth studies around that, not to my knowledge. Photo point monitoring, though, is something that we rely on for sharing the message about progress. But yeah, certainly a good thing to talk about and discuss in the team about how that could be enhanced. Thank you.
How does your strategy code compare to your arrival?
Can you repeat that, sorry?
How does the strategy code compare the new arrival of the guest?
Oh, like yeah, good question. And the Rangitata Gorge Land Care Group meets twice a year with all the funding partners and stakeholders. So those sorts of discussions can be spoken at length then, but often, we're trying to be more timely than that. So they'll get put in front of the key stakeholders when they're first found and then discussed. And, you can call emergency meetings or, discuss over the phone what the approach might be. But yeah, just like your slide earlier, Kerry, that conundrum, in the absence of evidence, do you make a decision right now to act? And I think for a lot of the time it makes sense to act if the problem's small enough that you can get ahead of it. Yeah.
Just any ideas on the seed bank longevity? And kind of interesting because it's a really moving system with grinding and seed and so on. I'm wondering if you have any insights on that.
Longevity of all the species, or?
Well, especially the legumes.
Yeah. No, fortunately not. I would rely on the science around that, which sounds like it could be 60 to 70 years for gorse and broom. There might be other knowledge in the room around that if anyone knows.
I mean, that is the answer.
Yeah.
But maybe not on a braided river.
Yeah. No, good question. These are long-term programs. Laurie Prouting, he's adamant that this has to carry on forever. Like, we'll just probably never get there to a point where you can just stop doing maintenance work. Particularly when you've got new incursions coming, and pathway management is certainly a priority as well in catchments like this. Yeah.
Just a question around sort of herbicide tactics for those same species. I'm interested to know if you were using NET, and if so, are you caught up in big EPA monitoring for works over and around water?
EPA monitoring, no, I can not to my knowledge. The detail of the program and the herbicides down at that granular level, I'm afraid I can't answer that one, but I can get answers to you though, because Pete has all that at his fingertips. But yeah, I think some of the, we are away from the river, you can use Tordon, graze on as well, and glyphosate in places that are a bit more sensitive.
Sweet. Awesome. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you.